Over to Waukee, Iowa, just getting underway, a Carly Fiorina campaign event at Rube's Steakhouse. Our live Road to the White House coverage continues here on C-SPAN.
Senator Sass, Ben, thank you as well. I'm so honored to be talked about and sharing a stage and endorsed by these great gentlemen from Nebraska. I want to introduce my husband, Frank, who's standing behind Jeff there. Frank and I met 34 years ago. After I got out of the secretarial pool, I finally went off and got an MBA. I joined AT&T. I was this little entry-level salesperson, you know, clawing my way up. Nobody took me very seriously, but I don't give up very easily, and I had this problem, and I wanted to figure out how to solve it, and nobody would help me, and somebody finally said, you know, you ought to go meet this guy, Frank Fiorina. So I went and met Frank. He was something of a technical expert, and you know, he took me seriously. He solved my problem. He was really cute, so I had to marry him. You know, when Jeff and Celeste and I were riding over to this event, he asked me a question. He said, when did you first start thinking about running for president? So I told him the story, and I'm going to tell you. It was in the summer of 2014. And I was at a Rotary Club, as a matter of fact. Ben, I was at a Rotary Club meeting and I was giving a speech. It wasn't a political speech. If you've ever been to a Rotary Club meeting, or maybe you're Rotarians, you know that you sit down, you have lunch, the club does the business of the club, and then the speaker speaks. And before I got up to speak, this gentleman sits down next to me at lunch and he says, you know, I don't think I'm going to agree with you on anything. I said, wow, why not? Well, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, we're not going to agree. I said, okay, well, maybe you ought to listen. So I gave my speech, and I wasn't talking about politics, I was talking about possibilities. The possibilities in this great nation. That human potential is the only limitless resource we have, and it's the only resource we need to solve every problem. I talked about how this has been a place of possibility, more possibilities for more people, from more places than anywhere else on earth. And at the end of that speech, this same gentleman comes up to me and he says, amen. And then he said this, you know, Carly, we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore. And that really hit me, because it's true. We don't. And when we lose the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation, we lose the core of who we are. And that set me on a journey that maybe I could offer leadership that would restore possibilities for every American regardless of their circumstances. Now, I want to tell you that I am grateful to all of you for being here tonight. But I am beyond grateful for the role that Iowa caucus goers play. Because you see, you've given me a chance. When I launched my campaign on May 4th of 2015, nobody gave me a chance. I was 17 out of 16 candidates. Pollsters wouldn't ask my name. None of you had ever heard of me. In fact, less than 4% of voters had ever heard my name. And the pundits and the insiders all wrote me off. But I came to Iowa, and you showed up in living rooms and dining rooms and diners and town halls, and you listened. And here we are with 5 days to go. And guess what? We have a great ground game here. We have great ground games in all the early states. We have leadership teams in 25 states. We've gotten on the ballot in almost 50 states. A lot of governors who are running can't say that. You got a lot of candidates out here who have spent tens of millions of dollars on television. You got one candidate who doesn't need to spend any money on TV because it's on the TV all day long. Guess what? You send me out of here with the wind at my back, and I'm going to go all the way. So Iowa, send me out of here with the wind at my back. You know, I was talking about possibilities a minute ago. I know this country has been a place of possibility for me, and for Frank too. Frank started out as a tow truck driver in a family-owned auto body shop. He became an executive at AT&T one day. I started out typing and filing and answering the phones for a little 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a deep recession in the late 70s. I have traveled and lived and worked, done business, done charity, done policy work all over the world for decades, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, it is only in this nation that a young woman can start out the way I did, typing and filing all those many years ago, go on one day to become the chief executive of the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible here. But you know, I have to tell you the truth. Along the way, I have been told by a whole bunch of people, sit down and be quiet. Sit down and be quiet, settle. Don't challenge the system, just accept the way things are. And I have ignored that advice my entire life. But I am running for the presidency of the United States because I think the American people are being told these same things now. I think we are being told to sit down and be quiet about our God, about our guns, about the truth about the abortion industry. I think we're being asked to settle. Settle for a nation where record numbers of men are out of work. Settle for a nation where record numbers of women are living in poverty. Settle for a nation where our young people don't even know the American dream is alive and well for them. Settle for a place where working families' incomes have been stagnant for decades despite all the speeches by all the politicians. Settle for a nation where we are destroying more small businesses every single day than we are creating. And that means we're destroying the job creators, because it is small and family-owned businesses and farms that create 2/3 of the new jobs in this country and employ half the people. We're not putting people back to work because we're destroying the people who create the jobs. And all the while that we're being asked to settle for all this, the rich get richer, and the well-connected get better connected, and the powerful get more powerful. I think we're being asked to accept a system of government that no longer works for us. Let us face it, ladies and gentlemen, the government spends more money every single year. It has been spending more money under Republicans in the White House and Democrats alike for 50 years, and yet this government is absolutely incompetent and corrupt. Incompetent. We cannot care for our veterans. Incompetent. We cannot secure our border. Corrupt. This government picks winners over losers. The government doesn't serve us anymore, ladies and gentlemen, although we pay for it. The government serves and nurtures and protects itself. Now, maybe you think these are really harsh words, but let me tell you, in poll after poll, in survey after survey, it is clear 8 out of 10 Americans now believe the federal government is corrupt. And 8 out of 10 Americans also believe we have a professional political class of both parties that cares more about its position, privilege, and power than on getting anything done. I'm running because I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm fed up. Ask yourselves, you are consumers of politics. You're very sophisticated consumers of politics. How many presidential cycles have presidential candidates come out here and told you the same thing? We're going to reduce debt and deficits. We're going to secure the border. Sorry, Mr. Trump, you didn't bring illegal immigration up. We've talked about it for 25 years. Every single election cycle, we talk about it. How often have they come out here and told you they're going to reform the tax code? They're going to reform Social Security. We're going to roll back all these regulations. You hear it every cycle, and it isn't getting done. Yes, Democrats have been far worse than Republicans, but let us be honest. When was the last time we repealed a regulation? 50 years ago. When was the last time we actually reduced the size of government? It's been a really long time. Have we ever actually tried to reform the tax code? Nope. I'm running for president because we can solve every one of these problems. We actually can. But we cannot solve these problems unless we remember who we are. And Senator Stas and Congressman Fortenberry talked about who we are, because they know this. You know who we are? You know who we are intended to be? We the people. We are intended to be a citizen government. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I think we have reached a pivotal, perilous time in our nation's history. I am running for the presidency of the United States because I don't think we can sit down and be quiet anymore. I'm not willing to. I don't think we can settle. I don't think we can accept a system anymore. And so I don't want you to be quiet either. I don't want you to settle either. So I will ask you, to stand with me, fight with me, vote for me. Because citizens, my fellow citizens, it is time. It is time we take our future back. It is time we take our politics and our government back. Citizens, it is time. We must take our country back. Now, you've sat quietly and listened to a lot of talk, so I'm going to be relatively brief, but let me tell you a couple more things before I take your questions. Number one, I come from a world where people are held accountable. You know? Where people are held accountable. And I actually think you come from that world too, right? We know that talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. A person's character is defined by what they say, not by what they do, not by what they say. So I have rolled out a blueprint for how we're going to take our country back. You have it in front of you. You can take one when you walk out. Why did I write it down? Because I want you to hold me accountable. You're going to help me get it done, but I want you to hold me accountable. These are not the only things we have to do to take our country back, but they are the first and most important things that we have to do to cut this government down to size and hold it accountable, to restore the character of this nation, to protect our borders, to repeal Obamacare finally and put a health care system in place to lead again in the world and defeat our enemies. You're going to help me get that done, and I want you to hold me accountable. I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started running for the presidency, I was asked by a seasoned political reporter here in Iowa, they said, well, you know, you're not used to the level of accountability and scrutiny that presidential candidates have. Wow, really? I said, let me tell you what I had to do as a chief executive. Every 90 days, I had to stand up in public and tell the world what we had done the previous 90 days in excruciating detail. And then I had to answer the questions in public about what we had done. And then I had to talk about what we were going to do, our intentions, for the next 90 days, for the next year, for the next 2 years, in detail. And I had to answer every question in public. And if I misrepresented our results or our intentions, I would be held criminally liable. Now imagine if we held politicians to this standard. So we can get this blueprint done, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Hold me accountable. You're going to help me get it done. Now I'm going to tell you another story. I'm going to tell you a story of how we're going to get this done and restore citizen government. This is a story both about the power you have as citizens, but it's also a story about why we have to take our country back. Remember the scandal at the VA in Phoenix, Arizona? Remember that? Remember we learned to our great horror that veterans were dying waiting for appointments and that bureaucrats were cooking the books so nobody would find out. The American people, the citizens of this great nation, were so outraged by this revelation that you exercised power, you flexed your muscles, you flooded Congress with tweets and posts and phone calls and emails. And guess what? That power, that pressure worked. And Congress, this hopelessly divided Congress, acted in 3 weeks. In 3 short weeks, Congress passes a bill that says we could fire the top 400 senior executives of the VA for dereliction of duty. It's a breakthrough. You can't fire anybody in the government. By the way, pretty good idea. You don't do your job, there have to be consequences. You got that done. And it passed the Senate 99-0, and President Obama signs it into law. That's because you put pressure. But then here's what happened. We all moved on with our lives. And despite all the pretty speeches, so did the politicians. 3 people got fired. We now know that 307,000 veterans died before receiving health care. And the VA handed out $142 million in bonuses for superb performance. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot settle for this. It is a stain on our nation's honor. But it's a reminder that you have power. And you know what? When we use our power, things happen. But when we don't use our power, when you don't use your power as citizens of this great nation, we lose it. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. The first item on my blueprint is we got to go from a 73,000-page tax code. That's what it is today. 73,000 pages. And all that complexity always favors the big, the powerful, the well-connected, the wealthy. The second item on that blueprint says we got to change the way the government budgets money to get control over the money, because the money is yours, not theirs. And the government doesn't budget the way you and I do. You know how the government you know how you budget, right? You examine every dollar. You can cut any dollar. You can move any dollar, right? That's how you budget, not how the government budgets. Once the government has money, they own it. You don't ever get to examine it, and they never have to give it back. They just ask for more year after year after year. That's how the government can spend more money every year and never have enough money. So you know what? We gotta force the government to budget the way you do. The way you budget is pretty common sense. We all budget this way, but the fancy word for it is zero-based budgeting. Now you know there's been a bill sitting on the floor of the US House to go to zero-based budgeting. We gotta get it voted on, just like we gotta get that 3-page tax code passed. By the way, there's been a plan for a 3-page tax code lying around for 20 years. Why do you suppose those things don't get acted on? You know, because if you change the tax code, simplify it, and you change the way the government budgets money, what are you doing? You're goring everybody's ox, aren't you? We are really challenging the system in Washington. So how are we going to get those things voted on? I'll tell you how. I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones or your iPads, your PCs. If you have a flip phone, you might want to consider upgrading. I say this because I've noticed a great emotional attachment of Iowans to their flip phones. Yes, you have one, see? And you're hanging on to it for dear life. Okay. Listen, I'm going to ask you to take out your smart device of choice. And I'm going to say, do you agree with me that we finally ought to pass that 20-year-old tax code that's 3 pages instead of 73,000? And do you think we ought to get control over the money that you send to Washington every year by making them budget the same way you budget? If you agree with me, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 21st century. There's an app for citizen government. Technology is an unbelievably powerful tool. We use it for silly things like voting people off of islands. And too bad we can't do that with Trump, by the way. But the point is, we use it for foolish things. I'm going to use it for important things, to restore power where it belongs in the citizens of this nation. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. And I'm going to go in that Oval Office every single week and ask you that question over and over again. Because when you exert power, the political class moves. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Now look, we can get this blueprint done. We can restore power where it belongs. But first, of course, we have to begin by winning this election. So maybe there's some of you, I hope not very many of you in the room, and I hope none of you by the time we're done tonight, but there may be some of you who haven't made up your minds yet who to vote. I know you decide notoriously late. I've learned, you know, people say, okay, I've only seen you 3 times. I've learned. Anyway, if you haven't made up your mind yet, I hope you will by the end of tonight, but I'll tell you what, in your heart of hearts, you cannot wait to see me debate Hillary Clinton. You cannot wait. Yeah. And you know why you're all cheering? Because you know what's going to happen. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Good. Because I know more about virtually everything than she does. Because I can say, I do, I'm sorry. Because I can say to her like nobody else can, Mrs. Clinton, you have held a lot of positions and a lot of fancy titles, but you haven't accomplished much in your life. You've been wrong about every foreign policy challenge. And I will also say this, Mrs. Clinton, you famously asked what difference it makes how 4 Americans died in Benghazi. Allow me to tell you the difference. When terrorists purposefully attack an American embassy and murder 4 Americans, including our ambassador, and the next morning you stand up and you lie about it and talk about a video that does not represent our values, instead of saying this was a purposeful terrorist attack and the United States of America will retaliate. Mrs. Clinton, what you are saying to every adversary we have and every terrorist organization in the world is open season on the United States of America. That, Mrs. Clinton, is what difference it makes. You know, politics is covered like a sport, like a game. But it's not a game, and it's not a sport. So when we're all finished thinking about winning, you need to think. The people of Iowa need to think, particularly because you do have a really important responsibility. The people of Iowa need to think carefully about what does it take to actually do the job. What does it take to do the job of President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief? I think it takes somebody who understands how to create a job, how to save a job, how to protect a job, what destroys jobs. In other words, I think we better have a president who actually understands how the economy works. I think we need a president who understands how the world works. The truth is, I have more foreign policy experience than anyone running. I have been in and around the world for decades. I have held the highest clearances available to a civilian. I've chaired the advisory board at the CIA. I've advised the NSA. I've advised 2 secretaries of defense, a secretary of state, and a secretary of homeland security. I know our military. I know our warriors. I know our intelligence capability. I have met more allies and more adversaries than anyone, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton, only I didn't do photo ops with them. I did private meetings with them. Okay, we're getting another microphone here, maybe. And so I know, ladies and gentlemen, having been in and around the world, knowing the things that I know, having done the things that I have done, I know that when we do not stand with our allies and when we do not confront our adversaries, the world becomes a very dangerous and tragic place. So, on day one, we need a real reset in the world, ladies and gentlemen. We need a real reset, not a gimmicky red button, a real reset about how the world perceives us. And so on day one, I'm going to make 2 phone calls. 2 phone calls from the Oval Office. The first will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu. This is really getting aggravating, huh? The first will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu. The Prime Minister of Israel, to reassure him that we are going to stand with the state of Israel always. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's a really important phone call. But let me tell you something, having been in the Middle East a long time, and knowing our Arab allies who must help us in the fight against ISIS, I can tell you that even our Arab allies, the Jordanians, the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Bahrainis, the Emiratis, the Kurds, all of these allies disagree with Israel. But they also watch how we treat Israel. C-SPAN, I think maybe this is a problem. No? All right, okay. No, it's not holding. The batteries are going bad. All right, I'm going to shout as loud as I can, all right? Because that's aggravating. If you can't hear me, wave your hands. All of our Arab allies who disagree strenuously with Israel also watch how we're treating Israel. And they conclude if we are willing to treat our friend Israel like that, then their friendship doesn't mean anything to us. And we need those Arab allies to help us defeat ISIS. But the second phone call I'm going to make is to the Supreme Leader of Iran. Now, I must tell you, I have never met him. I have never been to his country, and I don't actually think I am his cup of tea, so I don't think he's going to take my phone call. But he is going to get my message. And the message is this: New Deal. New deal with a new president. Until and unless you open every military and every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, are going to make it as difficult as possible for you to move money. We can do that. I know how to do it, and we don't need anyone's permission or collaboration around the world to do it, and we must do it. Because until and unless... Until and unless we stop the money flow, the Iranians are going to use it to fund terrorism, fund a military buildup, and fund a nuclear buildup, which is most definitely not peaceful. And by the way, Iran is most definitely our adversary, and Russia is as well. Donald Trump is in a bromance with Vladimir Putin. But let me tell you, Vladimir Putin is our adversary, and he is looped in an unholy alliance right now with Iran. With those 2 phone calls, ladies and gentlemen, a signal is going to go out around the world, a real reset, that the United States of America is going to stand with our allies. We are going to confront our adversaries, and we are back in the leadership business, which is where we belong. We need a president who understands bureaucracies, folks, because our government has become one giant, bloated, inept, corrupt bureaucracy. And we better have somebody who understands how to cut bureaucracies down to size and hold them accountable. And I understand the first place you start is with the money. We got to get control of the money. Our president needs to understand technology. Guess what? It's really important in the 21st century. And I'm going to use that technology to harness your power as citizens, to move the political establishment. But technology is also a weapon. It's a weapon that is being wielded against us by our enemies. And we need a president who understands that and knows what to do about it. Because right now, we are losing the war in cyberspace. We shouldn't be what we are. We will not with President Fiorina in the White House. But the last thing I'm going to say, we need a president who understands what leadership is. Leadership is sometimes making a tough call in a tough time and standing up and being held to account. And we have lots of fine candidates running for president, but we have some candidates running. Try this. Thank you. We have some candidates running, honestly. Woo-hoo. We have some candidates running who have never made a tough call in their lives. They haven't made an executive decision in their lives. Leadership is about challenging the status quo. All right, I'll keep shouting. Leadership is about challenging the status quo. You know, if you don't challenge the status quo, you can't solve problems. Managers just do the best they can within the system. We got a lot of people who manage. We need somebody who's going to lead and not be afraid to challenge the system. And finally, and then I will take your questions, finally, I learned my most important lesson about leadership a long time ago. When I was a secretary, I thought that the leader was whoever had the big office, the big title, the big parking space, and the big perks. And then I got a little older and wiser, and I learned that there were people with big offices and big titles and big egos to go along with them, and they were not leading. You see, leadership has nothing to do with the size of your office. It certainly doesn't even have anything to do with the shape of your office. And no way does it have anything to do with the size of your ego. A leader is a servant. A leader serves. And the highest calling of a leader is to unlock potential in others. My highest calling, ladies and gentlemen, is to restore citizen government to this great nation. I will not falter. I will not sit down and be quiet, and I will not settle. And so I ask you, stand with me. Fight with me. Vote for me. It is time to take our country back, citizens. Thank you. Okay, questions? Yes, ma'am.
My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 4 years ago, and my dad is her caregiver. And, you know, they plan to retire and travel around and enjoy life, and instead my dad is looking after her medications and stuff. She's still at home, but if you're elected president, I wondered what you would do to support the funding of research as well as helping caregivers to, you know, live day to day.
Yeah. So my dad died of Alzheimer's as well. So I'm very sorry. The question was about Alzheimer's. If you could not hear it, I'll keep trying to shout. When you can't hear me, let me know. Look, there are lots of places in our healthcare system where we are not making enough investments. And one of the things that government actually should be doing more of is basic research that helps everyone. There are lots of places in our healthcare system where we're not making enough investments. Alzheimer's is one. You heard that my husband Frank and I buried our younger daughter to the demons of addiction. And mental illness and the prevention and treatment of addiction is another place where we're not making enough investments. And so, you know, we were promised when Obamacare was passed that this was going to be the answer, right? We were going to invest. The only trouble is it's not working. I'm a cancer survivor. So I am a walking, talking, pre-existing condition. I really do understand
that you can't leave families behind because of pre-existing conditions. But here's what's going on with Obamacare. First of all, we have wrapped people up in so many rules, and caregivers are having a really tough time. Nurses are having a really tough time. Health insurance premiums are going up. Emergency room visits are going up. We're dumping more and more people into Medicaid, and fewer doctors are accepting Medicaid. And by the way, buried in all those complicated pages of Obamacare, remember when Nancy Pelosi said, we got to pass it to find out what's in it? You remember that? Well, let me tell you one of the things that's in Obamacare that you probably don't even know about, because most people don't. Buried in the pages of Obamacare is the federal government takeover of the student loan business. The federal government has taken over the student loan business. And the federal government now decides how much your student is going to pay for their student loan. And you know what the government's decided? That you're going to pay between 4.5% and 8% interest on every loan. And meanwhile, the government pays between 1.5% and 2.5% interest on its debt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let that sink in for a moment. The federal government took over the student loan business in the pages of Obamacare and makes money on every single student loan. That's a racket, ladies and gentlemen. It's a racket. We got to take our government and our country back. So, the item on the blueprint, number 3, we must repeal Obamacare. We have to go to zero-based budgeting so we can make the investments in the places that matter instead of wasting money in all the places we do. But then we got to replace Obamacare with something that's going to work. So let me tell you what we're going to replace it with. Number 1, we're going to move money. When we get control of the money, we're going to move money out of Washington, D.C. and back to states, and we're going to ask states to manage high-risk pools. There are people who truly need help, and we need to help them. But when you put money and power closer to people who are impacted by decisions, what do you get? Better decisions. So we're going to ask states to manage high-risk pools. We have examples in the past of where this has worked. Number 2, the federal government should not mandate what health insurance you buy. And they shouldn't wrap caregivers up in a bunch of rules and regs. But here's what the federal government should mandate. That every health care provider publish on a regular basis their costs, their prices, their outcomes. Because guess what? You don't have a clue what you're buying in health care. I sat in a hospital for a lot of time, and I didn't know the cost of my care, the price of my care, or the quality of my care compared to somewhere else. And when you don't know cost and price and quality, you don't know nothing. And when you don't know nothing, guess what? You have no power. And by the way, there is no incentive for cost to go down and quality to go up, is there? Because nobody knows what it is. And then, finally, we're going to do in health insurance what we've never done. What has health insurance always been? It's a cozy little game between regulators and health insurance companies. We used to play it on the state level. So the Iowa regulators got together with the Iowa health insurance companies and decided this is how many of you can play this game and compete. And what we've done with Obamacare is make that one big national cozy little game. And the health insurance companies helped write this bill. Don't you for a moment doubt that. What have we never tried in health insurance? Never have we tried a free market. An actual free market where people have to compete for your business. Now, I come from the technology industry. It is the most relentlessly competitive industry in the world. It is the closest thing we have to a free market. And what have you come to expect from technology?
A lot.
A lot. Yes, ma'am, exactly. Cooler apps, better prices, neater stuff, year after year after year. Health insurance companies, any health insurance company, has to be able to compete for your business, and you get to pick the plan you want at a price you can afford. That's how we're going to fix health care. Yes, ma'am.
What's your favorite part of the Constitution?
Wow, my favorite part of the Constitution. You know, I so appreciated what Ben Sass said about the First Amendment being the heart. But right now, actually, I think my favorite part of the Constitution is like 9 and 10 and parts of 14 that remind us that the federal government has certain enumerated powers, and if those powers aren't enumerated, then they belong to states and individuals. Because you see, we have forgotten what the federal government's supposed to do. The federal government's doing all this stuff it's not supposed to do, and they're not doing it very well. The original blueprint for this nation, ladies and gentlemen, was the Constitution of the United States. So, my little blueprint is going to take the big blueprint, the Constitution in mind, and say when we get control of the money, all this stuff the federal government's not going to do, they're not going to do anymore. We're going to hand the power, the decision-making, the money back to states and communities and citizens to get it done. And there are certain things, of course, that the federal government has to do. The federal government, for example, has to protect the border. Because if we can't protect our border, we cannot protect our sovereignty. The federal government has to keep us safe. The federal government has to manage an immigration system. All those things they're doing badly, those things we're going to do well, and we're going to give everything back to where it belongs, individuals and states. Yes, sir. And then I'll come to the young lady over here. Yes, sir, in the back.
As a younger first-time voter, I'm feeling a lot of pressure from like every candidate, and I want to know if you had a certain push that you could get younger voters to caucus and vote for you.
Well, you can. Look, hey, let me be clear. I can't do this on my own. I'll tell you what, you walk out of here wanting to caucus for me tonight, there are a lot of young people here. You go out and talk to everybody you know. This is how it's going to happen, folks. So here, I have a little rule. A lot of people want a picture. That's great. One picture, one vote. That's how it works. Okay? So, seems fair, doesn't it? I mean, it seems fair. Look, here's what I would say. Let me answer your question seriously. But let me also seriously say to you, you can help. You can go out and talk to every young person you know. Because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, candidates, we got to do our thing, right? We got to convince you. But the truth is, most people are most influenced by people they know. So every single one of you know a lot of people, and they like you, and they respect you. They may even love you. So you know what? Go talk to them. Say, I'm going to caucus for Carly, and I want you to caucus for Carly too, and here's why. That'll help. But you know whose future is most at stake? Yours. Yours. It's young people's future who's at stake. Bernie Sanders, I mean, honestly, we have an avowed socialist who runs around saying we're going to give away a free college education. He doesn't tell you that it's the government that's messed it up. He doesn't tell you that he talks about income inequality. He doesn't tell you that the bigger and more powerful and more complicated government gets, the more true it is that only the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected can deal with it. You see, socialism makes income inequality worse, and all you got to do is look at the last 8 years to understand that. Because in the last 8 years under Barack Obama, 95% of the wealth created went to the top 1%. So, I hope that young people are going to be excited about pressing 1 for yes and 2 for no, because that's the world you live in. But if you need help convincing someone, try this. I ask young people all the time, I say, you know, I'm going to just borrow your thing here as a little prop, okay? All right. I say, you know, I know. Believe me, I've experienced this. How do things work for you in here? How do things work for you in here? You know, it's responsive. It's personal. You're in control. You can do whatever you want. That's how things work for you in here. Now think about your last trip to the DMV. How'd that feel? Did you feel valued? Did you feel listened to? Did you feel responded to? Would anyone even look you in the eye? No. That's what government looks like, folks. That's what government looks like when it is unresponsive and out of control. And that's why we got to take our country back. For you. The young lady right there.
Thank you for taking my question.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to ask, if you were elected president, would you have a cabinet free of people who made a career out of a revolving door between government service and corporate interests?
No. But let me tell you the kind of people I will put in my cabinet. They have to have 3 characteristics. Number 1, they all have to be leaders, not managers. Leaders. You see, there are a lot of people who want to get a cabinet position because they want to kind of settle into that big office. and kind of accept things the way they are and go to the cocktail parties and have a big title. It doesn't make them bad people, it just makes them managers. I need leaders. I need leaders who are going to challenge the status quo. I need leaders who are going to roll up their sleeves and say, we got to get control of this thing. And I don't mind making a few enemies to get control of this for the citizens of this nation. So they got to be leaders. Number two, they got to bring different things to the table than I do. Because you see, I've learned over many, many years that the best teams are teams that are not people that are all the same. They're teams of people that are different, that bring different perspectives, different experiences. Because when everybody's the same, when you all agree with each other really quickly, you're probably missing something. So I need people who are going to bring something different to the table. And number three, they must be truth tellers. And most importantly of all, they must be a truth teller to me. Because the most dangerous thing that happens to an executive, any executive, but especially the President of the United States, is people quit telling them the truth and start telling them what they want to hear. And that is deadly. Those are the kind of people I'm going to put in the cabinet.
Well, thank you for reminding us of the many things you've spoken about tonight. Could you address the issues of big money in government and Citizens United?
Yeah. Well, look, crony capitalism is alive and well, folks. You know what crony capitalism is? Crony capitalism is what happens when only the big and the powerful and the wealthy and the well-connected can deal with this ever bigger, ever more powerful, ever more complicated government. And crony capitalism has existed under Democrats and Republicans alike. By the way, let's just say the truth. Donald Trump is the ultimate crony capitalist. So he may portray himself as an outsider. He's the ultimate insider. Hillary Clinton has made millions selling access and influence from inside the system, and Donald Trump has made billions by buying people off like Hillary Clinton, and he freely admits it. So guess what? We're not going to change the system by putting a political insider or crony capitalist in the Oval Office. No, we are not. Look, I'm all for getting money out of politics, but the same rules have to apply to everybody. So I find it the height of hypocrisy, frankly, when Democrats say, ooh, big money is such a terrible thing, but it's terrible that corporations can fund politics, but it's okay if unions do. I find it the height of hypocrisy when Hillary Clinton says, ooh, I think big money's terrible, but Wall Street, come on in and fund my super PAC. So here's my answer. Let's just be transparent about everything. Anybody who wants to put money in the political system, go ahead and put it in, but it's going to be published and we're all going to know. And I think that'll fix the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close it up. Oh, okay, we'll take one more question from the young lady over here. Is it hard running for president? Well, what a good last question. Well, I'll tell you the truth. There are things about running for president that are a joy every day. This, for me, is a joy. To come to a restaurant, to sit with citizens who care deeply about their nation, from very young to more senior, to hear substantive questions. Not a single one of you has asked me about Donald Trump. Woohoo! You've asked me about education. That's all I hear about from the media. Their horse race, oh no, that. You've asked me substantive questions. This is a joy because you care about the future of this nation, and so do I. There are hard things. I mean, it's hard to go all day, every day, day after day. But I do it with gratitude. I truly do. So, I wouldn't trade this for a thing. Maybe you want to run for president someday, but I hope you won't mind if I warm up the chair for you. Have to be quick. All right, this lady is begging. Go ahead.
I watched you debate, and you're a wonderful debater. And I just wonder if there's an extra podium there after you've done at the first debate. Will you try to go get on that extra podium tomorrow night?
All right, so listen, gang. Listen, gang. I can't change the media. This is a rigged game, folks. You know, the media decides who gets covered. The media decides who you're going to listen to. The media's already decided the answer to this race. But guess what? You haven't voted yet. You know who can change the media?
We can.
You can. You can. You send me out of here with the wind at my back, and they might start paying a little bit more attention. So, listen, my fellow citizens, we can get all this done. Like running for president, it's not going to be quick and easy. But I don't think you expect quick and easy. I think what you expect is leadership and results. This is an exceptional nation. It is not a perfect nation, but it is an exceptional nation. It's an exceptional nation because we believe profoundly in the value of every life. We believe that every individual is gifted by God and has enormous potential. And we are exceptional as well because we know in our bones that power dispersed into the hands of the many is more competent, more compassionate, wise and just than power concentrated in the hands of the few. We have had too much power, too much money concentrated in the hands of too few for too long. So, I will not falter. I will not sit down and be quiet. Stand with me. Fight with me. Caucus for me. Citizens, it is time. We must take our future back. We must take our politics and our government back. Stand with me. Citizens, we must take our country back. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You have my caucus.
I got you.
You got my caucus.
All right, if you want a picture, come on up, but you know the rule. One picture, one vote.